Well, I went to college for Rochester Institute of Technology was the school. I stayed for my undergraduate, which I got a degree in graphic design. But Rochester is famous for Kodak, so there was a lot of photography students there, just very strong photography influence when I was working on design. So all of my design kind of had a photographic look to it, which at the time I think was pretty new and different. And actually, I think what still resonates about my work, even in design today. But I stayed there for my master's degree in computer graphics. And that's really where I was exposed to After Effects. And at that point, 3D was Alias Wavefront. So kind of started combining all of my graphic design into a narrative, like animated narrative, but animated from like a design standpoint, not from like a character animated standpoint. And at that point, it was still kind of a new field. You know, Kyle Cooper was around, Seven was just done a few years before. And so when I entered the world, I was like, I want to go do this. And there were three places that I was like, I got to work at one of these three places. And it was Imaginary Forces, You and Company, and Digital Kitchen. And so, of course, I sent all three of them my work. And I heard back from Digital Kitchen kind of immediately. And they were like, we're opening a Chicago office. Do you want to do that? And I was like, yes. I'll see you there in a week. And I just packed up all my stuff after college and went to Chicago. And that's really where, I mean, it doesn't really happen for most people like that. I guess now thinking back about it, it's very kind of bold to just be like, I'm going to work at one of these three places. But I don't know. Sometimes just got to believe in yourself, you know? So I worked at DK for 6 years, and that was great. I really grew from being like a junior designer that didn't even know what a hold keyframe was to, you know, being a full-on creative director. And that's really where you learn it's mileage, not age. Like there, 6 years was really like a 12-year career. I had done hundreds of projects and just was totally immersed in it. That was my complete life. So after that, I went back to New York, which is where I was from originally, and worked at Superfed for a couple of years. And I really liked it, but I missed Chicago. And so at that point, I was 30, and I like to say perfectly naive and also talented. So just the exact right combination of the naivety and the talent to go back to Chicago and be like, I'm going to start a company. And in that moment, you kind of realize like you need both of those things. You need, again, the confidence and like the positivity and belief that it's going to work out, but also like the skills and the talent to make it happen. Because if I knew then what I know now, I'd be like, well, do I have enough money for lawyers and for all of this other stuff that I'm going to need to build a studio and equipment and technology and personnel? But at that point, it was like, well, I just need a producer right now. And I just need, you know, to incorporate my business and, you know, to get a little advice here and here. And so it became exponential, everything that I learned to start the company, just learning on the fly. And I actually think it's funny, you see all these people getting MBAs and learning how to make a business, but when you have talent and you have a skill, making a business starts from there, you know, and it's just providing basic services to people and not over-promising, and certainly kind of growing within that. So, and business is very simple. It's either you can afford to take a job or you can't afford to take a job. Just because a job is $1 million, if you're only going to make 1% on it, you're better off taking a $50,000 job that you're going to make 50% on or 30% on. So it's really very simple. You just have to have kind of the balls to make the right decisions, because sometimes it's very scary to pass on $1 million job. But if you're not going to make $1 million, you know, if you're not going to make a good percentage on that, then you got to pass. But that's really my story. I got very detailed very quickly, but which I guess says a lot about me. But I do think it's been a very focused, interesting path, you know. Every day I was working on a title sequence and on a commercial project. I was working a lot on development there because I did a lot of storyboards and I was selling a lot. So they tended to have me on that side instead of on the production side. So, man, I pitched on so many title sequences. So many. Everything from Sex and the City, I didn't produce it, but pitched on it through ultimately what I got my Emmy nomination for, which was Ghost Whisperer. And that was right before I had left. Beautiful title sequence. But yeah, I mean, there was never a moment where I wasn't working on pitching one. It's still a small niche of people that really produce main titles. Everybody really wants to, but it's not like commercials where you build a reel and you put it out there. Like, you got to know who is producing this and how to get in touch with them. And once you've produced one for one show, they call you again and they call you again. I mean, the amount of work I've gotten out of my community main title is crazy. I mean, that's how I got into Marvel and all of that stuff. So yeah, like DK, that's how I made my kind of first round of contacts, into that main title kind of industry. And not even knowingly, because I wasn't at DK thinking I was going to start a company. I was at DK to be at DK. Like, I still think about, like, if it wasn't a certain kind of environment that made me left, I would still be there. Like, I loved working there. I loved the projects I got to work on, and I loved the people I was working with. So it really was about the work for me. And as long as that work was there, I would have kept on. So, and really the company for me was about going after the work I wanted to go after. But you realize when you start your own company that you're on your own again, and that you don't have DK's reel and the talented producers and animators and designers. It's just you, and then you have to start all over and build a reel all over. But you do have some people that you've met along the way. And if you have those good relationships and treated them well, that will start to grow new things. While at GK, while I was there for a short time, they had an executive producer who was on the entertainment side. And so when I went solo, I reached out to her and asked her for tips, and she was at that point not working with DK anymore. And so I had hired her to be my executive producer for entertainment. And while that lasted a very short period of time, in that time we had gotten Shameless and Community. And they had called and was like, do you have anybody that might be interested in pitching on this? And she's like, yes, I do. So she was kind of like a rep for entertainment. We called her executive producer, but she really just hunted down projects that would be appropriate for me. So that was it. Finds out who's working on them, when they're working on them, how they're working on them. And that information is kind of hard to come by unless you know, like, some sprouts of information. Well, I think having like your own studio is a pretty interesting thing, especially being on the creative sard. So it's interesting how people see a creative run studio versus a producer run studio. And I've heard that from clients along the way, like, oh, it's nice working with a creative owned studio. And I'm like, what? At first I was taken back, like, who cares who owns it so long as the talent is in place? But I think I always just want to do something right for the client that's beautiful. So it's not just about churning it out so that I can make 38% instead of 35%. Like, I would rather not make that 3% and turn out a piece I'm proud of. And I think that is inherently what's different about my studio and the way we produce things. Like, we'll take an extra day and finish it off properly. And we'll add an extra artist to it if we feel like it needs an extra artist. So, I think that's a significant difference just between a creative run studio and a non-creative run studio. It's just like, who's booked on it? How long are they booked on it? When can we get them off of it? And for me, it's not like that, and certainly it's also about, like, artists' talent is an interesting thing. I mean, yes, almost anybody can, from a producer standpoint, can produce a job, but on the artist side, like, somebody might be better at typography or better at doing this certain kind of imagery or better with this animation style or better with this look. So as a studio, we're always managing the talent that's right for the job. And if we don't have somebody that's appropriate, we'll bring somebody in. So it's an interesting thing, again, being a creative run studio, like, knowing that and managing the talent to be on the right jobs is really important. And so as we've grown the company, it's been very much like that, because we're producing work, I think, wholeheartedly, and for the best results. We keep getting more work like that, it keeps kind of feeding on itself. And I think once we work with a client, they feel very well taken care of, and well managed. So they keep hiring us. I mean, most of our business is repeat business. So for me, it's like all about meeting that one person and having it be a good fit with the client, and then just providing our services to them, which is making stuff. And I think the realization that ownership over the job goes a long way too. Like, we might be producing the job, like we might be the architects building the house, right? And the contractor building the house, but the client has to live in it. It's theirs too, you know? So they're happy that we take ownership over it, but they own it. Actually, they own it. We don't own anything we make. We own our process, but we don't own the final outcome. That is owned by the client. And I think when you realize that and really think that through, that creates amazing client relationships, because they feel like you're really working for them and not for yourself, and just off to do something arty for yourself. So once that trust is built, they come back again and again and again. And you have some clients that come back like multiple times a month. And then you have some that it's like you hear from once every 2 years, you know? So it's just, you know, one of those things when you're going a studio and starting out with just me, hiring an executive producer and then another artist and then another artist. And all of a sudden it's grown into like this real deal operation where we're 15 full-time people. And right now we have a full house, which is 40 plus people in the studio. So that's a significant thing. That's a very big thing. And to have seen that grow organically because of how we treat people and because of the quality of work we do is very special. And I think that's the root of, I don't know, starting a company, you know, just understanding the intent. Some people have trouble writing a mission statement. For me, it's so simple. Like, our mission is to do work our clients are happy with and that we're happy to do, and live a life around people you want to be around, you know? So just because somebody, and that's another thing, just because somebody's like amazingly talented doesn't mean you hire them. They could have all the talent in the world and be like superstar, awesome. I don't care. If you have a little bit of talent and you're all in and you're a good person and you're easy to be around and you make this process easy, that's the kind of person I want in my studio. Because as a creative director, I'm confident in that way, and I know I can get good work out of them and help steer them in the right direction. So it's just important to me to staff smartly and not penny wise, pound foolish kind of thing. Okay, commercial and entertainment are two different beasts. And the longer you're on commercials, the more you want to be on entertainment. The more you're on entertainment, the more you want to be on commercials. That's just the way it is. But to really have a healthy business financially, it has to be 80% commercials and 20% business. And 100% business. No, but 80% commercials and 20% entertainment. Because entertainment budgets, people probably think you're paid a lot for stuff, but you're not. Most of the time, it's just for creative experience, to create something beautiful for your reel, but also to create something that is not disposable. When I think about commercials, no matter how beautiful they are, no matter how groundbreaking they are, they go out into the world and they're amazing for that moment, and then they're immediately replaced. With entertainment, title sequences, film, TV, whatever, that's a part of that show forever. That is a real thing. So it's just a different kind of art form. I mean, it's a similar process. It still costs us the same amount of money to do things, and my talent still costs the same, like rent still costs the same, everything still costs the same, but fascinating that they don't have great budgets. But in order to have a balance in the studio and still be able to afford to do that stuff, that's how we do it. How best to manage a team? Have a great producer. You know, I think there's really two management sides. You have to manage internally your team, but you also have to manage your client. And most of the time, the person talking to the client is a producer. And they're talking to a producer on their side who's talking to their creative director. So think about it. Like, I'm the creative director talking to my producer, who then talks to their producer, who then reiterates the information to their. That's like a game of telephone. And we're talking about creative concepts and all of that stuff. So eventually, when it gets to a certain point, it's just like set up a phone call. You know, set up a phone call let's just talk about it, or have them by the studio, or which most of our stuff is remote. But phone calls are great because you can hear in a person's voice if they like something or don't like something. You can ask leading questions as a creative director. But when you're going day to day, just like emailing back and forth, like here's our latest work in progress, let us know what you think. You know, it's a fascinating thing. So there's the communication from a team standpoint out with your client, which it's very important to have creative producers that understand what I'm saying so that they can explain it to that person's producer, who can then explain it to their team. And having a creative producer on our side really helps the process along, because they can see what you're saying through the process, and they really understand our process and what that means. It's not just about like posting a QuickTime and having it be the right format in the right place. There's more to it. It's how you write, how you communicate with like language. That's really important. But then managing a team on our side is interesting. And it's interesting because, having been a designer, a junior designer, and then a regular designer, and then a creative director, and now an executive creative director, I've been through kind of like all the different layers of management. I personally like being a creative director. I like having a team of artists and designers and animators, plugging away, being involved in the day-to-day, like minute-to-minute action, and being like, this is working, make sure this person has like how that's working with you so you guys can combine forces, you know what I mean? Like share elements and blah, blah, blah. So I love that. But I'm taking a step up now to being an executive creative director because I have 2 creative directors on staff. So managing creative directors to help them manage their team is a different thing. And that's actually something I'm going through now very wholeheartedly and learning a lot, because everybody's management style is different and how they communicate is different. And you have to respect that in order to have good communication with your creative directors. So I think like the key is listen a lot before you insert your opinion. But at the end of the day, as a creative director, like I'm the one talking to the client. I feel like I know what they want. And if a designer is asserting their opinion, which is a direction I don't feel like is right, I'll say, if I feel like it's a good idea, I'll say, okay, explore that, but you have to do this too. Like you have to. I feel like I know what they want. I've heard this request a million times. Like, let's at least give them an option that is what they're looking for, so that at least they feel like they can then choose something else, because we can say, hey, this is what you asked for, but we also did this amazing thing and we think it's worth your time. Without that, you can't show them the other thing. They'll be like, you're just not listening to me. You're doing what you want to do. I've heard it all before. So I think at that point it becomes about like respecting the artists around you enough to give them some freedom to explore how they want to explore, but then also having faith in your opinions and your experience, because that's what makes you a creative director. It's really all of that experience and knowledge coming back. I mean, that's the only real way I think somebody can call themselves a creative director, is to hear what a client is asking for and then be able to communicate that to a team of artists to get it there. And it's real easy when it's just like one person, but when you have a team of 15 going on something huge, it's like really important that information be crystal clear and that everybody be on the same page. So Marvel, I mean, like ask any person that does title sequences and you're like, what do you want to work on? I'd be like superhero titles, superhero movies, and especially Marvel, because they make a quality movie. I mean, Chris Nolan's Batman was pretty awesome. So that would have been a treat. And it's nice and dark and it's gritty. So that was cool. But I mean, you're looking at some of these other movies and you're like, I just really want my work that I put all of my heart and soul into to be on a good movie, And Marvel just makes great movies. They're superhero movies, but this last Captain America movie was a great movie. Like I cared about all of these characters, like as human beings, and they're superheroes. So I'll just say that. So I mean, it's a dream job for sure. Dream client. The way we got in the mix, people probably want to know this, is, again, relationships. My first title sequence as my own company was for Community. And I'll give you a little story. It might be a little long-winded, but we were called and they were having a problem with their main title that they were working on. It just, yeah, they were getting what they wanted, but it wasn't right for the show, and they wanted some other options before they finished that one. And so they called, and I was in LA at the time, and they're like, great, can you come in tomorrow? And I was like, sure, I'll come to the studio tomorrow. So I was not far from the studio the day, now the next day. And they called me and they're like, okay, I'm just curious if you have anything for your presentation. And I went, presentation? You called me yesterday. I thought I was getting a download. And they're like, well, we told you what the show is. And I was like, but I literally thought I was going there, I was just going to get information, not to give ideas. And they were like, oh, okay, well, we'll see you in a couple hours. So I'm like, oh my God. And this is where I think it's my personality. It was like, okay, normally I would have a flushed out deck with images and like designs and all this stuff. And me and that producer were sitting at a yummy pizza place. And I was like, okay, I need ideas. So I just took out my notebook and I came up with, all these different ideas for what could be the foundation of a title sequence for something in community college with all these different people coming together. One idea was about rejection letters. One idea was about standing in line, just kind of waiting, making it almost feel like you're at the Department of Motor Vehicles, the DMV, just waiting to get your license and you get your community college badge. And one was the fortune teller, the cootie catcher. And then I had like a list of 8 ideas or so. And so I go onto the set, and it was literally the set, the library set. And they had all the tables pushed together. And there were the Russo brothers, Dan Harmon, all the writers for the show, and all the producers in a U. And they like sit me like right in the middle of this U. Only woman there, which is kind of fun, I think, because I'm just like got my big hair and I'm like, okay. I just open my notebook and I just start reading my ideas to them. And the first one was the rejection letter one. And they were like, oh, interesting idea. And then the writers started kind of tossing it around the table at each other. And I watched them. I tell this story because I think it's fascinating and it definitely impacts everything I do. I watched them build the idea up and it was seeming like a good idea. And then all of a sudden, they were like, yeah, but it's kind of rooted in rejection. And we're not about rejection. And then they started kind of playing with that as a theme. And they're like, yeah, that's not the idea for us. And I thought, interesting. It doesn't matter how pretty our frames are. If the idea is not right, it's not right. And so we went idea by idea. And the 2 that they really responded to were the fortune teller and the waiting in the DMV line. And they were like, cool, can you send us some look frames for what this would look like, or a storyboard for what it would look like in a day or 2? And I was like, sure. And I sent them those 2 storyboards and they chose the cootie catcher and we were off. And I just thought, like, wow. At a certain point, it doesn't matter what it looks like if the idea doesn't fit. And that taught me a huge lesson as a designer, because coming out of DK, where it was all about creating these cool looks and like, how could they not choose this? This was the coolest looking thing ever. Because it didn't matter what it looked like. It didn't matter what style it was or what kind of type it was. Entertainment people don't think like that. They don't care. It's idea. It's writers. You are trying to please writers, not other designers. So that's the big lesson there. And then from there, we developed a very close relationship with the Russo brothers, and we did another pilot they had going, and then animal practice, and they were involved in Happy Endings, I believe. Or maybe it was just the producer from that. Anyway, we did a bunch of other things with them. And then all of a sudden, they got Captain America, the Winter Soldier. And I emailed them and I was like, oh my God, like, I'm so happy for you, but I'm more happy for me because this is amazing. Like, when you need a main title, will you please call and give us the opportunity to pitch? And they were like, yeah, sure, that'd be great. Talk to you in a few months. And then 8 months later, they're moving into post or however long. And they were like, Erin, we're so sorry. We just talked to Marvel about including you, but you don't have the right security requirements and, and it's just not going to be possible. And so I was like, all right, well, I'll see you on the TV side. Call me when you have another show. And they were like, cool. But then it was 4 months after that or 5 months after that, it was Thanksgiving. And to me, the Marvel dream was dead. To them, we were a little boutique company and we didn't do huge feature stuff. And, now I understand why, having been through it, which I'll explain in a little bit. But they called and they were like, the producer from, Captain America called and they're like, per the Russo brothers, we'd like to invite you to pitch on the main title for Captain America. So this is after they told me that it couldn't happen. So whatever was going on their side, obviously it was going well because the executive team felt very comfortable with at least seeing them through. And it meant that they went to bat for us in the background. Like, we had built such a good, strong, positive relationship that they were like, no, we really want her to pitch, And that meant a lot, for sure. And then, of course, we went and we pitched. We only had a week to do concepts, and it was like Thanksgiving week. So I felt like all the decks stacked against you, for sure. And to me, I wasn't going to get the job. So I just was like, I'm going to do the coolest stuff I can think of. I'm going to make them sad they can't give us this job, And I went out there just wanting to make the Russos proud that they suggested somebody that can create quality concepts. And so we did, and I know it was a very big pitch. I think like 5 companies pitched on it or something. And we went out and they were just, you could tell which board they were responding to, and they were really happy, and it was a good meeting, and everybody was in good spirits. Like, you could tell they were having fun working on this movie. And, on the flight, we literally went from the pitch to the airport, got on a plane to fly back home. And when we landed, we got word that we got it. So they were like, but here's a list of everything you need to do for security. Here's a list of everything technically required to produce this. And luckily, again, my talented team, like, I had the right person for visual effects in-house. We had just moved into our big, beautiful space that we built. So we had the infrastructure to be able to do this. Had I just started the company, like, I would have had to turn down the work because my servers weren't secure, and I didn't have video cameras, and I didn't have limited access to certain rooms. And then on the server side, like, none of your content that's Marvel can connect to the internet in any way. So every single one of those computers talks directly to the server and back, and nothing else. So if you're producing anything else in a studio, everything has to be set on a separate server. That's 2 servers going simultaneously without internet connection. So if I did have an artist that I wanted to say, like, work on 2 projects at once because he was only there's no way. Like, they would have to move from one seat to another seat to talk. So, but just setting all that infrastructure up is a very expensive, time-consuming process. So while we were ramping up for Winter Soldier, we were modifying the office so that we can comply with their security requirements. But what's great is now we comply with their security requirements, and it was a good experience, so they keep hiring us. So that's how that happened. And I think I know it's a long-winded story, but I think it just makes you realize, like, who your client is now. Like, if you connect, like, you're going to move with those people through your lives and careers, if you do it right, and if you're truly a partner with them in projects. Yeah. My approach when doing a title sequence is pretty simple. I mean, you just read the script or watch a pilot, and you just start, really brainstorming. I like pen on paper themes. Like, what are themes that would be good to play off of? And then what would be a good metaphor for that theme? So I think a lot of artists go right to looking at Pinterest and visuals, like, oh, that would be a cool style, or that'd be a cool style. And yeah, I get sucked into that sometimes because it's fun to have a new project, and that's just how it is. But my most successful stuff has come from, for sure, just starting with what are these themes we're playing with, what are the metaphors or possible visuals that could play into that, and then hitting Pinterest and, like, doing some artist research and just kind of looking at different styles to see what. Is it a dark thing? Is it a light thing? And I'm not even talking about ripping off other people's work. I think it's just to get a sense of the mood of the piece that you're looking to go for. And in that sense, like, it could be an all graphic piece, but for some reason I'm looking at photography, because it's about creating that, getting a sense of the vibe you're looking for, or feeling like, oh, that color palette might work, or that, and then you start kind of fusing it all together and start making frames and go from there. Yeah. How do we find talent? Most of the time, talent finds us these days. We do go to universities. I like finding people just out of school. I feel like once somebody's been in the work field for a couple of years, they have crazy salary expectations and have already been taught how not to do things. I think we have a rare studio in that we are very process oriented. So we teach people the way to use the file structure, the way to collaborate, the way to communicate properly. We're not just about the product, we're about the process. And so if we follow our process, we know we'll have the right product. I'm always very confident that we will get to where we need to get to. And so when you get somebody just out of school and you get them maybe over the summer, their junior year, and we do that a lot, hire people over the summer for their junior year and then, bring them back when they graduate. I think it's a special thing to start somebody off on the right path and just see that little bit of potential in there and the right attitude and energy, and they're easy to be around. Again, that part of, being in the studio and not having people being like, oh, I got to go talk to so-and-so, that's terrible. That's not the person you want to have in your studio. But you want a collaborator and somebody that is open to feedback and responds to feedback. So I think always sending reels is good. Following up if you don't hear back is totally fine. Our studio, we always review everything sent to us. Sometimes it might be in 3 months, but it does get reviewed and we are in touch with everybody. But if you are, coming up on your summer and you're open for an internship or something for the summer or for even a holiday break, even 2 or 3 weeks, I'll take you. That's great. You know what I mean? But we only take 2 or 3 people at a time because it's important that if they're going to be in the studio, 1, they have a workstation to sit at and be an active part of the team, and 2, that we can focus on them and really give them the kind of experience they need. And we need to see if they're going to make it or not make it because it is kind of like a job interview. So I would say send your work, follow up about it. Another great thing to do is people email me and they think I'm going to immediately respond to them. And that is not the case. When I am emailed a reel, I put it in a to review reels folder. And then when I'm on a plane or when I have an afternoon, I go through and do that folder and I look through everything and make comments and da-da-da-da-da. What you really should do if you're looking for a gig somewhere at a very specific studio is look and research who worked on those jobs. You'll see that Duarte worked on it or Tanaya worked on it, and you'll start seeing those names over and over again. Go on LinkedIn. Find out about them. Where did they go to school? Are they a part of any motion? Not that I'm telling people to stalk people, but find out who works on these jobs and get in touch with them. Those are the people that you can start forming relationships. Those are the people that are going to be creative directors eventually and obviously have my ear and access to me and all the producers and know if we're bidding on a job. And they could say hey, I heard about this guy from SCAD and they're, really talented illustrator. I'd be like, cool, what's their name? Let's get them in the mix. So it's not just about getting access to me and my 2 creative directors. It's about getting access to the studio, and that could be anybody in the studio. So I think it's important to do research on who's doing these jobs and really reach out to them. Working at DK was an interesting thing. It was a petri dish of talent. You had, Danny Yunt there, and you had Mason Nickel. And, I was in a different office than them, but I was competing against them day in and day out. And, these are the guys that did 6 Feet Under and, 6 Day. And I would see their work in progress come in, and I'd be like, oh, my God. If I am going to make it here, I have to compete with that. And it was that real drive and energy that really, I think, putting yourself amongst all that talent and being in that kind of environment and having to compete at that level right out of school was really what did it for me. I realized I got to put in real time here and I'm in real energy. And it's not just going to be throwing a couple images down and walking out the door at 6. It was going to be doing it and doing it and doing it and asking them for feedback, honest, real feedback on our kind of check-in calls. We had these things called midpoints where everybody would post their work in progress and you'd be like, oh my God, there's no way I'm going to win. It was very competitive. So I think if you put yourself around people that are really strong, even if they're not the best communicators or don't want to mentor you, you can certainly get a lot from it. Yeah. I mean, I like it in a linear sense. I think motion design it's 3D, it's 2D, it's live action, it's anything from a design point of view. I called our company a design driven production company because we're producing things. If you want us to shoot stuff, I'll shoot it. If you want it to be all 3D, all 3D. A lot of times clients don't even fully understand how we're making the stuff we're making for them. And I think that's okay to a certain extent. So motion design is kind of a tricky area, but even now with interaction, there's a motion quality to how one page slides out and the next page slides in. Websites, everything kind of has a certain cadence, and so a lot of times, motion design is about creating a motion personality for something. Like we were doing an end tag for Aldi right now, and Aldi's a grocery store, and it's known for being cheaper than other grocery stores. And, it's just a logo. It flips in and lands, classic logo. But does it have a little bounce to it? Because if it has a little bounce to it, it's a little bit friendlier. And is it sharp, boom, and focused? Like stamp, done, What does that say about the company? So I think motion design is really about, motion. It's about creating a personality with all of the different tools, and a lot of times with clients, I'll ask leading questions like that, like, okay, like, what is the personality? How do you want it to be? I can make 1,000 spinning logos for you. They're not going to be right unless I understand who you're talking to or what the tone of the rest of the commercial is. Is it deadpan? Is it like British comedy, which they kind of are? That's a different kind of thing than, we're cheap and that's great, So I think motion design is like so many different things. You could work at a magazine on their editorial side. You can work, at a studio like mine, which like super focuses on it, or you can work at an advertising agency, or you can work at an editorial company. I think motion design is probably like one of the biggest, most important fields you can go into right now, or like easiest to get a job anyway. You know what I mean? I don't know anybody that's not looking for some kind of motion designer. It's just a big part. Even if you're mocking up something to show how it's going to move when it's a website, like you don't program the website to show somebody how the website works. You make it, and then you go and program it. So I think it's a fascinating kind of thing. And now like content is just content. People just throw the word content. Like I say, it doesn't cost me more or less to produce something, but well, it's just for for Facebook feed instead of broadcast. I'm like, yeah, but I still make it the same way. And I think that's the thing about motion design. It's all these tools. We got After Effects and Cinema and Maya and, visual effects software like, Nuke and all that stuff, and live action. But it's all of those elements coming together to create some kind of linear narrative, I guess, is what motion design is. After all of that. But to me, it's more about the personality, like getting to that. Yeah, I think I'd like to work with Pixar. I think it would be fun to do some kind of title sequence for them. I don't know why. I just rewatched Incredibles the other day, and their title sequence was 2D and amazing. And I just think it would be interesting if they called me and were like, we're doing this obviously animated movie. Can you create a live action main title for us? I think that would be amazing. It would be an interesting experience. I think I would learn a lot working with character animators. So people that are so on that side, I think I would learn just a ton that I don't know. Yeah. So that would be interesting. I think it's just more tools, more software, different render settings. It's still about creating an experience for somebody. And that has nothing to do really with concept and tone. So for me, it's just different render settings, and approaching the pipeline differently for how are we going to make this. But it's still kind of creating a narrative and creating a story and coming up with a look for it. Yeah. So for me, it's exciting because there's just more of it. So there's more content than ever being created, more different places it's going. And like we do all the stuff for the United States Postal Service. And you would think like, oh my God, the Postal Service, can't be doing anything cool. Well, they do. Like during the holiday time last year, they did these AR experiences where if you put your phone up wherever there's a post box, all these Charlie Brown characters will run out and run around it. Oh my God. And we got to animate all that. And that was so fun. And you would never expect that the Postal Service would do something like that and that they would call us for that. But it's totally in our wheelhouse to do that. So I love those projects. I think they're super fun, and they're just creative. They're just people being creative and playing with new technology in a way that, is unexpected. And they're trying to figure out how to make it work for them and how it can promote them. And I think there's still a lot of that needs to be figured out. It's like, okay, just because you can do this doesn't mean you should do it. Like, how does it relate to who you are as a brand and what you're selling and all of this other stuff? So, but when it's right, it's fun, and it's fun to be a part of producing that stuff. And there'll always be more, but there's always, so like when it comes to production, you can either produce it like cheap, download, dirty, get it done, or you could put time and resources and money and into it and really make something beautiful. And I think as a studio, you have to decide who you want to be. You're either going to be the people they call when they need something now and they need it cheap and you got to crank it out, and you could be that kind of studio, or you could be like our studio, which is like, it's going to cost this. It's going to take 3 weeks. It's going to, this is our process. This is our review process. This is how many times you get to take a look at it before we deliver it. And this is what we promise to deliver you. And it's just a different way of doing it. And I think those two kinds of studios will always be around. And that's what's going to be the big difference moving forward, is the quality. Have they gone through the process, or did they get it done quick and cheap? Okay, so there is a big difference to me between TV and film main titles. And even in film main titles, sometimes you have a title at the beginning of the movie, and sometimes you have a title at the end of the movie. Title at the beginning is just called the main title. Title at the end is called the main on end. And those two things are quite different too, because it's like when you're in a theater, you're like immersed. You're a captive audience. You are 100% focused. Your audience is 100% focused on what you're showing them. And they're excited to be there. You're in. So you can kind of get away with a little bit more, plus you usually have 2 minutes to do it, 1.5, 2 minutes, maybe even 3 minutes. So you can ramp up a little slower. You can, it's just different, like in terms of an experience. But on the TV side, I actually think, I always talk about this on other TV main title designers think I'm crazy, because I think music is more important than the visual on a TV main title. And I think that because if you close your eyes and think about all the main titles you love over the years, it's the sound that hits you first. It's not the visual. And I think that's like the emotional responses from that, like, oh, my show's on. The sound. So I think with a TV main title, if you don't have the right sound, if you don't have the right audio or track, the worst. It's like a failure, in my opinion. And we have no control over the music. So whether they score it or have a track that they want to use, usually that comes in after you've already started working on it. And sometimes you're so happy because it's amazing. And then sometimes you're like, oh, this is the worst. Like, what have they done? So that's a really big deal. The music on a TV main title is a really, really, really big deal. And usually with films, they have a composer that's composing it, whoever's composed the film, and, on Marvel stuff, they have like the most amazing composers. So we know we're going to get amazing soundtrack that's like superhero and big and like, an orchestra in London doing it for you, which is, so on a TV side, the music is very, very important. And it's just different. You have 30 seconds, sometimes less now. Sometimes people are asking for 8 seconds. Right now we're working on one that's 7 seconds. Happy Endings was 7 seconds. But it's fun. I feel like if you're, creative and smart, you can really work with whatever they give you. But the one thing I would advise is just music. And I have like the worst taste in music, but I know if something's good or not good. If it fits the tone or doesn't fit the tone, or makes me like into it or not into it. And it has like the right arc. But TV main titles, also another difference is you got to get in right away. There is no time to do a slow ramp up. There is no time to like tease your audience a little bit. You got to just like start and just be like, bam, this is the tone of what you're about to watch, you know? So it's definitely a different thing. Well, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is an awesome, to me, title sequence because it's one of those things. We had worked with the producer on another show, and he moved to Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and he was like, my guys, I told him you're my girl for main titles. Can you have a chat with them? And they had no idea what they wanted. They are comedy writers. They could care less about their main title. Like, to them, it is like a sentence on their script, cut to title. You know, that's all it is to them. So they weren't really actually very helpful in giving direction. You know, we're like, so what are you looking for? Or something a little catchy or something, you know, where you're telling a little bit about what you're going to see. And they were like, I don't know. It's kind of, you know, it's a workplace comedy is what they kept calling it, you know, because they came from The Office and from Parks and Rec. And I'm like, okay, so basically their show could be anything. They don't have to be cops. It's just a place where all these people come together and it's all about the characters and their personalities. So I was like, okay, well, we got to do something big and bold. And there was of course, no budget to shoot anything, although we probably would have if we came up with an idea they liked. And I was like, well, what if it was like an old school Dragnet, Cagney and Lacey kind of thing? And we just had a retro vibe to the whole thing and did, you know, a shitty cutout of their cast member, froze it, and like, you know, and they were just like, that's really cool. That's awesome. And so it was just kind of a fun thing, but it's also the music for that is really great. And that's what kind of like ties it all together. Without that music, it would just be like, what am I looking at? Who cares? But that's what kind of gets you into the vibe of the show. So that's kind of cool. Every year they call us and they're like, we got a new cast member. We're going to do a new title. And they even paid us for doing a revision to the title. And then they called and they're like, we'll take that as a credit. We don't have to do a revision to next year. So that's the only time I've ever been. I still owe them a main title revision. They've paid us already. I think that's hilarious. They're fun guys though. When they won a Golden Globe for, you know, writing that year. Andy Samberg won one, and then, you know, Michael Schur and Dan Gore won one also for, I think, writing. And we always send like congratulation gifts when somebody wins, but we don't send flowers or something like that. We send like a basket of toys, like Magic 8 balls and Rubik's Cubes and like a punching bag, like one of those crazy blow up things. And they were just like, you're so crazy. But that's what's so fun about it. You know what I mean? Like, they're just a goofy bunch of guys. And it's just fun to be a part of that kind of a sitcom-y pop culture thing. You know, Community now, people talk about Community all the time. Like, oh my God, that title scene is the best. When I first did Community, nobody noticed it. Like, nobody could care less. Everybody could care less about Community. People are like, oh, I love that now. And I'm like, I think it's just because it's been around for a while. And it's been on the show for a while. So people kind of got used to it and it became something cool. It wasn't initially cool, but it became something. And so I think Brooklyn Nine-Nine's like that too. And it's all that to me is just all about the personalities of the show writers and the creators because they're funny, funny guys. So